It began with 5 words that sent shockwaves through the palace. He's in trouble now. No cameras caught the moment. No aide was standing close enough to understand what those words meant. But for those who heard them, those who saw the trembling in Princess Charlotte's voice, it was like watching a ghost return. A ghost with a message. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. What could possibly make a 9-year-old royal utter those words with such quiet conviction? This isn't just a story about a letter. It's a story about a legacy that refused to stay buried. About a grandmother whose love defied time, and a granddaughter who stumbled upon the truth meant for a future king. And once Charlotte found it, there was no going back. The moment that changed everything happened on a quiet afternoon at Balmoral Castle. The royal family had retreated for a short break, the kind of escape they often took to avoid headlines. William was preoccupied, handling endless paperwork behind closed doors. Kate was reading in the garden. George was on his tablet somewhere. And Charlotte, restless as ever, decided to explore the one part of the castle no one talked about, the old wing. It was a part of the estate whispered about by the staff. A corridor filled with relics of another age, moth-bitten curtains, locked doors, portraits of royals long gone. Charlotte had always been drawn to it, maybe because it felt untouched by the world of cameras and expectations she lived in. Or maybe because deep down, something was pulling her there. What she didn't know was that behind one of those dusty doors, sealed off for decades, lay a secret that her father had hoped would never see the light of day. She pushed open a narrow door and stepped into a room that smelled faintly of rose and cedar. The walls were lined with old furniture and forgotten boxes. Sunlight sliced through half-shut blinds, revealing dust swirling in the air like glitter frozen in time. And there, in the far corner beneath a faded tapestry of St. George, sat a small wooden chest. The lock had long since rusted away. Something about it called to her. She knelt down, brushing her fingers across the lid, noticing an old crest, one she'd seen on her grandmother's belongings in Kensington Palace. Diana's crest. Charlotte's heartbeat quickened. Inside the chest was a stack of photo albums, some jewelry, and a bundle of envelopes tied together with a faded blue ribbon. The paper was yellowed, the ink faint, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Even Charlotte, who had seen her grandmother's signature on keepsakes, recognized it instantly. Princess Diana's handwriting. The first envelope she pulled out had no date. It was addressed in soft cursive. To my darling William, when you are older and understand what they've done. Her small fingers trembled. She didn't open it. Not yet. She just stared at the words, confused but curious. What had they done? Who was they? And why would her grandmother, gone long before she was born, leave behind something so ominous? The question lingered in her mind as she carefully unfolded the letter. The first line read, "My precious boy, I know the world will try to tell you what's right. But always listen to your heart. It knows the truth." Charlotte bit her lip. The handwriting danced across the page, tender but urgent. As she read further, the tone shifted. "There will be times they ask you to forget me, to bury the truth, to protect the crown at all costs. But William, if you ever feel that weight on your chest, remember, it wasn't your fault. You were just a boy, and they were already planning what would come next." Charlotte froze. She didn't understand everything, but she knew the gravity of the words. They weren't just a mother's love. They were a warning. A strange chill ran through her. Somewhere behind her, a door creaked softly, as if the castle itself were listening. Diana's voice seemed to echo from the paper. "I fear for what they'll turn you into, my darling. Promise me that one day you'll tell the truth, no matter the cost." Charlotte didn't notice that her hands were trembling until the letter slipped from her grip. She scrambled to pick it up, heart racing. The last line read, "If they make you choose, remember what's true." And then, scrawled at the bottom, something different, an afterthought perhaps, hastily written. "They will come for me before I can protect you." Charlotte's throat tightened. It was as if time had folded in on itself, and for the first time, Diana's tragedy wasn't just history. It was alive, pulsing through the room. She folded the letter back, tucking it inside her sweater. She didn't know what to do. She didn't even know if she should tell anyone. But one thing was certain. This wasn't meant to stay hidden. Hours later, she sat at the dinner table, distracted. Kate noticed first. "Lottie, darling, are you all right?" she asked softly. Charlotte hesitated. "Mummy, she whispered. What did Grandma Diana mean when she said people made Daddy choose? Kate's hand froze midair. The silence that followed was suffocating. William looked up from his plate, his expression tightening instantly. What are you talking about? He asked, his voice calm but cold. Charlotte's small voice barely carried across the table. I found her letter. The fork slipped from Kate's hand. It hit the plate with a sound sharper than thunder. For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock behind them, every second landing like a drumbeat. William stood slowly. Where? In the old wing, Charlotte said. In a box with her name on it. His expression changed, somewhere between fear and anger. You shouldn't have been in there, he said, almost to himself. You had no right. William, Kate interrupted softly, but he cut her off. Do you have it with you? Charlotte nodded, reaching into her sweater pocket and handing over the folded envelope. William took it, his hands visibly trembling. He didn't open it. He just stared at the familiar handwriting, his jaw tightening. Then, quietly, he said, it was supposed to be destroyed. Charlotte's head tilted. Why? He didn't answer. He walked to the fireplace, staring into the flames for what felt like an eternity. Finally, he whispered, because it was never meant to be read. That night, the castle felt heavier, the air colder. Charlotte couldn't sleep. She sat by her window, looking at the moon, replaying the letter's words in her mind. If they make you choose. Choose what? The next morning, the royal staff sealed off the old wing. No explanation was given. The butler who had worked there since Diana's days was suddenly reassigned. The chest was gone, but the secret wasn't. Because Charlotte had seen something her father didn't know about, a second envelope. One she had slipped under her pillow, marked in the same familiar handwriting. For the one who carries my spirit. At first, she didn't understand. Then she realized Diana could only have meant one thing, her granddaughter. What she didn't know was that this letter contained something even more explosive. Something about the days before Diana's death, and what William had been told to do. For Charlotte, it wasn't about disobedience anymore. It was about truth. She had grown up hearing that her grandmother was kind, caring, loved by millions. But now she was learning that behind the smiles and charity events was a woman who had known too much, and tried to protect her son from the very system that eventually destroyed her. Charlotte started to wonder, how many lies had been told in the name of duty? The next time she saw her father, she asked him one question. Did you know she was scared? He froze. Scared of what? Charlotte looked straight at him. The people around you. He didn't answer. He just said, you don't understand. But she did. Children sense what adults deny. And in that moment, Charlotte saw something she had never seen before. Fear in her father's eyes. That's when she said it. The words that would echo through the palace walls and change the air around them forever. He's in trouble now. She didn't mean it as a threat. She meant it as a truth. Because once a secret like that surfaces, it doesn't go back to sleep. Somewhere deep in Balmoral, a storm had begun. Charlotte didn't yet know how powerful her discovery was. She didn't know that her grandmother's warnings had reached beyond time, that they implicated people still living, still powerful, still shaping the monarchy's image today. But she would. And when she did, she would face the same choice her grandmother once warned about. Truth or silence. The line between the two was getting thinner by the hour. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. It began as an ordinary morning at Balmoral. The kind where the Scottish mist clings to the windows and the air smells faintly of pine and secrets. The royal family had gathered for breakfast, the usual polite smiles masking fatigue from the public life they never truly escaped. Cameras weren't allowed here, but the weight of expectation still hung over them like fog. Princess Charlotte sat quietly at the long oak table, staring at the steam rising from her cup of tea. She wasn't a child easily distracted by toys or screens. She had her mother's quiet curiosity and her grandmother's restless soul. Something inside her felt unsettled that morning, an itch she couldn't name. William chatted absently about upcoming events. Kate smiled at something George said. The sound of laughter should have filled the room, but Charlotte barely heard it. Her eyes drifted toward the window, where an old tower loomed in the distance, a part of Balmoral she'd never seen up close. May I go explore after breakfast? She asked suddenly. Kate looked up, a little surprised. Where do you want to explore, darling? Charlotte hesitated. The old wing. The one with the blue doors. William's expression changed immediately. The knife in his hand paused mid-cut. "That area is closed off," he said quickly. "Unsafe. Unsafe." Charlotte frowned. "Why?" "It's old," William replied, voice tight. "Dusty, unstable floors. Nothing to see there." Charlotte nodded, but her mind was already working. Children are naturally drawn to what they're told to avoid, and the way her father's tone sharpened only made her more determined. By noon, the sky had cleared. The others went riding. Kate retreated to the garden with a book, and William disappeared for meetings. Charlotte found herself alone in the drawing room, her imagination burning with questions. She glanced toward the corridor leading to the old wing. The heavy doors stood like sentinels, paint chipped, hinges tarnished, history sealed behind them. And that's when she decided to go. She slipped on her coat and crept down the long hallway. Her small footsteps echoed against the marble floor. Portraits of long-dead royals watched her pass, their painted eyes following with a judgmental stillness. The silence was so deep it felt alive. When she reached the blue doors, her heart quickened. They weren't locked, just stiff with age. She pressed her palms against them and pushed. They opened with a long, groaning sigh. Inside, it smelled like time had stopped. Dust motes floated through slivers of sunlight, breaking through the cracks. The air was thick with something unspoken. Nostalgia, perhaps, or grief. The wallpaper peeled at the corners, and furniture lay draped in white sheets like ghosts frozen mid-dance. Charlotte walked slowly, running her fingers along an old piano. The keys were yellowed, but one note still hummed faintly when she pressed it. A lonely sound. The deeper she went, the more the temperature seemed to drop. It wasn't just the chill of stone, it was the weight of forgotten memories pressing down. Then, tucked behind a faded tapestry of a hunting scene, she found a small wooden door. She had to crouch to see the handle. It looked almost hidden, like it wasn't meant to be found. Her curiosity won. She turned the handle. It resisted at first, then gave way with a click. The door creaked open into a narrow room that smelled faintly of roses and candle wax. It was small, barely larger than a walk-in closet, but every inch of it told a story. There were old photographs pinned to the wall, a young woman in elegant dresses, her smile radiant, her eyes unmistakably familiar. Princess Diana. Charlotte's breath caught. She'd seen photos of her grandmother before, but never like this. These were candid shots, Diana laughing in the garden, writing at her desk, holding baby William close. Private moments that didn't belong in history books. On a small table lay a jewelry box, its hinges tarnished, and beside it a stack of envelopes tied with a blue ribbon. Charlotte reached out, her fingers trembling as she brushed the dust away. The ribbon fell apart easily, as though waiting for her touch. The top envelope read, "To my darling William." She stared at it, remembering her father's strange tone at breakfast. The one that warned her without words. Something in her chest tightened. She sat cross-legged on the floor, staring at the envelope as though it might speak. She thought of all the stories she'd heard about her grandmother, the compassion, the laughter, the way the world mourned her. But none of those stories ever explained why people still whispered about her death. Why even now, decades later, the palace avoided certain questions. Charlotte took a deep breath and slid her finger under the flap. Inside was a folded letter, written in a looping, graceful hand. The ink had faded slightly, but the words were still clear. "My precious boy, if you're reading this, then time has taken me where I can no longer protect you. But love has no end, William. It lives beyond the walls they build." Charlotte's eyes scanned each line, her heartbeat growing faster. "You'll grow up surrounded by people who smile and bow, but not all of them serve truth. Some will serve the crown above love, power above peace. And when they ask you to choose, I pray you'll remember what your heart knows." Charlotte swallowed hard. The letter wasn't just sentimental, it was haunting. It sounded like a prophecy written by a mother who knew her fate was sealed. Her hand trembled as she turned the page. "I was told to stay silent about things I could not ignore. About what I've seen, what I've been warned of. But I can't stay silent, not even for them. If anything happens to me, promise me you'll seek the truth. They'll tell you it's for the good of the family, but you'll know better." She stopped reading. For the first time in her short life, Charlotte felt a deep unease about the world she was born into. A world of secrets. A world where even love had consequences. The sound of footsteps startled her. She jumped, tucking the letter under her arm. Who's there? Her voice barely echoed. She waited, breath shallow, but no answer came. The footsteps faded. Only silence remained. She looked back at the wall of photographs. Diana's eyes seemed to meet hers through the decades. Calm, knowing, almost maternal. It was as if she was saying, "You found it, sweetheart. Don't let them hide it again." Charlotte whispered to the empty room. "What did they do to you?" She spent another few minutes exploring the small space, finding a few trinkets, an old brooch, a faded newspaper clipping about Diana's last charity visit, and a Polaroid of young William holding her hand near a fountain. But it was the last envelope that truly made her pause. Unlike the others, this one didn't have a name. Just 3 words scrawled across the front. "For when it begins." Charlotte didn't open it. She wasn't sure she was ready. Instead, she placed it carefully back inside the chest and whispered, "I'll come back." As she left the room, she didn't see the small inscription etched into the underside of the lid. Tiny and almost invisible unless you looked closely. It read, "They'll come for me before I can protect you." Outside, the wind howled softly against the stone walls. By the time Charlotte returned to the main hall, the others were still out. She slipped quietly past the staff, her mind racing with questions. Who was they? What did Diana mean by "come for me"? And what did her father know? That night, Charlotte couldn't sleep. She replayed every line of the letter in her head. Each word seemed to carry the weight of a secret too big for any child to hold. But she didn't feel scared. She felt something else. A quiet determination. If her grandmother had been silenced for speaking out, maybe it was time someone else spoke for her. Charlotte knew she couldn't tell anyone yet. Not Kate, not George, not even her father. Not until she understood what she had really found. As the moonlight spilled across her bed, she whispered, "I'll find out what you meant, Grandma." But she wasn't alone. From the hallway, faintly, came the sound of footsteps again, slow, deliberate, echoing closer to her door. She froze, clutching the letter under her pillow. The doorknob turned ever so slightly, then stopped. A shadow lingered on the other side. And then silence. Whoever it was walked away. Charlotte's heart hammered. She didn't sleep that night. When morning came, she decided to return to the old wing. But when she arrived, the door was sealed. A maintenance notice had been placed over it. In small letters, it read, "Restricted access, royal storage." Her chest tightened. Someone knew she had been there. And worse, they had taken the chest. Charlotte ran her hand over the cold metal of the new lock, whispering to herself, "You can lock a door, but not the truth." Little did she know, her discovery had already set something in motion. Her father's nightmares were returning. The staff had begun whispering again. And the palace was about to learn that secrets never stay buried, especially not when Diana's blood runs through the one who finds them. What Charlotte uncovered next would not only unravel a hidden part of Diana's final days, it would expose the decision that William swore no one would ever know about. But that revelation was still waiting behind one more envelope. And when Charlotte opened it, the words inside would tear the royal silence wide open. But what was written inside would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Charlotte hadn't stopped thinking about it. The letter, the handwriting, the message that felt too heavy for her small hands to carry. She could still feel the parchment between her fingers, the faint scent of rose water, as if the paper itself had absorbed her grandmother's perfume. She was told not to speak about it. But once you've seen the truth, pretending not to doesn't come easily. It had been 2 days since the discovery, and yet every glance from her father seemed to carry an unspoken warning. Every smile from her mother felt rehearsed. The house had gone quieter, tighter. Even the staff avoided eye contact. Something had shifted in Balmoral. The night after Charlotte found the letter, William had stayed up late. She could hear the muffled sound of his voice through the walls, sharp and low. He was on the phone, angry, desperate, perhaps afraid. Words like "contained" and "sealed documents" carried through the vents. Then silence. The next morning, he was gone before breakfast. Kate said he'd gone to London for urgent matters. But Charlotte knew better. That afternoon, she crept into the study, her father's private retreat. The smell of old books, leather, and pine filled the air. On his desk was a single photograph in a silver frame. William as a boy, sitting beside Diana on a picnic blanket. Both smiling, both unaware of how much the world would take from them. Charlotte reached for the frame. Behind it lay a small notebook. A black one, worn at the corners, with no title. She opened it and froze. Inside were notes, handwritten entries from years ago, all in her father's pen. Most were mundane, lists of appearances and events. But one stood out. The ink was darker, the words more hurried. December 1996. She said she feared them watching. Said I would understand one day. Told me not to believe the official story. I was too young to know what she meant. Charlotte swallowed. It was about Diana. A new question formed in her mind. What was the official story? She had heard bits and pieces growing up. Diana's car crash, the paparazzi chase, the tragedy in Paris. But even as a child, she'd sensed the tension whenever anyone mentioned her grandmother's name. Charlotte put the notebook back exactly as she found it. Her pulse raced as she left the room. That night, she made a decision. If her father had hidden something, she would find it. The next morning, when no one was watching, she returned to her bedroom and pulled the second envelope from under her pillow. It was the one she'd secretly taken from the chest. The one marked only with Diana's handwriting. For the one who carries my spirit. Charlotte held her breath as she unfolded it. The first line was short, as if written in haste. If you're reading this, then my fear has come true. She read on. I've seen too much, and I've been warned to stop. But how can a mother stop when her children are being shaped by the same hands that destroyed her peace? They want my silence. They fear my truth. Charlotte blinked, her eyes stinging. The press is only the surface, my love. The real danger hides behind polite smiles and official statements. Remember, what they call duty often means obedience. But love requires rebellion. Charlotte whispered the words out loud. Love requires rebellion. The line struck something deep in her chest. The letter continued. One day, someone in our family will find this. Someone who still believes in truth. It might not be you, William. It might be your child. And when that happens, the world will remember me not as the princess they pitted, but as the mother who tried to save her son. Her heart stopped for a moment. She read the line again. It might not be you, William. It might be your child. Charlotte's eyes widened. It was as though Diana had seen her coming. The next paragraph was messier, the ink smudged, as if written through tears. William, my darling, I forgive you already. I know the weight they will place upon you. You will make choices you cannot undo. But one day she will see. She will bring light into the place where I was silenced. Protect her when that day comes. Because she will be brave enough to speak where we could not. Charlotte's breath trembled. Was she referring to her? The last page was shorter. If you ever find this, my love, look for the truth in the red box. The one they said was lost. Inside it lies the name of the man who stood behind the wheel, but not behind the crash. Don't let them erase me. Charlotte didn't understand everything, but she felt the weight of it all pressing on her. A hidden red box. A letter predicting her own discovery. A grandmother reaching through time to warn her. She read the final words slowly. You will know when to speak. But when you do, they'll come for you too. The words blurred through her tears. She folded the letter and placed it back into the envelope. For a long moment, she sat motionless, her heart pounding. Then a knock at the door startled her. Lottie. Kate's voice was gentle. Can I come in? Charlotte quickly slid the envelope beneath her mattress. Yes, Mummy. Kate entered, smiling softly. You've been quiet lately. I've just been thinking, Charlotte said, trying to sound casual. About what? Charlotte hesitated. About Grandma. Kate froze slightly, then sat on the bed beside her. You know, your grandmother would have loved you very much. Charlotte looked down. Did Daddy ever talk to her before she trailed off? Kate's eyes softened. He did. But not as much as he wishes he had. Was he angry with her? Kate blinked. Why would you ask that? Charlotte shrugged. Because she said people made him choose. Between truth and something else. Kate's face went pale. Where did you hear that? Charlotte realized her mistake. I just read it somewhere. But Kate wasn't convinced. Charlotte, she said quietly, if you ever find something of your grandmother's, you mustn't talk about it to anyone. Not your friends. Not your teachers. Not even George. Do you understand? Why? Kate took a deep breath. Because not every story in this family has a happy ending. Her words were calm, but her eyes betrayed something darker. Fear, maybe guilt. After Kate left, Charlotte sat there for a long time, staring at the door. She now understood what her grandmother had meant. Love required rebellion, and silence only fed the lies. She whispered under her breath, "If you wanted me to find it, Grandma, I won't stop here." That night, she crept out of her room again, tiptoeing down the hallway. The old wing was still sealed, but she had noticed something earlier, a narrow servant's passage that led behind the blocked door. It was small enough for her to crawl through. Flashlight in hand, she squeezed inside. The tunnel smelled of dust and history. Cobwebs brushed her cheeks. Her flashlight flickered. At the end of the passage, she emerged inside the hidden room again. It was darker this time, colder. But the air felt different, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. The chest was gone, but the outline of dust where it once stood remained. On the floor, half hidden beneath a fallen photo frame, was a small brass key. Charlotte picked it up. It was engraved with 2 letters, RB. Her grandmother's words echoed in her head. "Look for the truth in the red box." RB. Red box. Charlotte clutched the key tightly. Somewhere in this castle, or perhaps in London, there was a box that held Diana's final secret. She turned to leave, but as she did, her flashlight caught something etched faintly into the wall. She moved closer, wiping away the dust. It wasn't a design or random marks. It was handwriting, tiny, carved by hand, maybe with a pen tip or nail. "Forgive me, Mummy. They said I had to." Charlotte's heart stopped. The handwriting wasn't Diana's. It was smaller, rougher, as if done by a child's hand. Could it have been William's? She stepped back, trembling. The realization hit her like a wave. Her father had been here. He'd known. He'd written that message. He'd tried to confess, maybe long before he understood what the message meant. The walls around her felt tighter, as though the room was closing in. She turned off the flashlight and stood in the darkness, trying to calm her breathing. Outside, the wind howled again, but inside, only one sound echoed, the soft beating of her own heart and the faintest creak from above. She looked up. In the ceiling, barely visible, was a small hatch door, a hidden attic space. She dragged a small chair under it and reached up, pushing the latch. It opened easily. Inside was a stack of old papers, maps, and a faded envelope, addressed not to William this time, but to the future queen. Charlotte felt a chill race down her spine. She held the envelope in her trembling hands and whispered, "You knew everything, didn't you, Grandma?" Then, as if answering her, a cold breeze swept through the room, snuffing out the faint light from her flashlight entirely. In the darkness, Charlotte thought she heard a voice. A soft whisper. "Be careful, my love. They're watching." She froze. The air went still again. Her heart raced. Was it her imagination, or had Diana's voice really reached across time and space? Charlotte climbed down, clutching the new envelope and the brass key. She knew this wasn't just a coincidence anymore. This was a message meant to be found, piece by piece, by the one who would finally tell the truth. And Charlotte had just taken the first step, but she didn't realize that someone else already knew what she'd found. Someone who had been watching. Because just as she slipped back into the corridor, a shadow moved near the stairwell. A man's silhouette. Tall. Familiar. And when Charlotte turned around, he was gone. The castle was silent again. But the truth she carried now had a heartbeat of its own. And it wouldn't stay silent for long. Because the next time Charlotte opened a letter, it wouldn't just be about her father's past. It would be about Diana's final night alive. And what that letter revealed would shatter the version of history the world had been told. But what Charlotte read next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The letter had changed everything. Charlotte could no longer look at her father the same way. Every smile, every kind gesture now seemed painted with a question mark. What did he know? What had he done? And why had her grandmother, someone she never even met, seemed to fear the very system that her father now served? The next morning, Balmoral was unusually still. The staff moved quieter than usual. The family had breakfast together, but it felt strained, like everyone was acting in a play they didn't want to perform. William kept his eyes on his phone the entire time. Kate tried to fill the silence with gentle conversation, asking George about his studies, Louis about his drawings. Charlotte barely spoke. She kept glancing between them, studying their faces as if searching for cracks in a painting. After breakfast, William stood and left without a word. His footsteps echoed down the marble corridor until the sound vanished. Charlotte turned to her mother. "He's been angry lately, hasn't he?" Kate sighed. "He's just under pressure, darling. So much responsibility, so many eyes watching." "But Grandma had eyes watching her too," Charlotte said softly. "And she didn't hide." Kate froze for a moment before standing abruptly. "That's enough about your grandmother for today." Charlotte didn't push further, but the words sat heavy in her chest. Later that afternoon, while the castle buzzed with quiet activity, Charlotte slipped into the library. It was her favorite room, walls lined with leather-bound books, old portraits, and a massive window overlooking the forest. She liked how peaceful it felt. But today, peace wasn't what she was looking for. She had brought the second letter, the one mentioning the red box, and the small brass key she'd found. She spread them across the desk, examining every word as if searching for a hidden code. "The red box," she whispered. She had heard that phrase before. Her history tutor once mentioned that the monarchs used red leather boxes to store classified papers. Even now, the king's office used them daily. But Diana? What could she have locked inside one? She scanned the letter again. "Look for the truth in the red box. Inside it lies the name of the man who stood behind the wheel, but not behind the crash." Charlotte frowned. The man behind the wheel? That must have meant the driver, Henri Paul. But Diana was saying he wasn't truly responsible? Her pulse quickened. What if the letter was hinting that someone else, someone powerful, was behind the accident? She leaned back in her chair, whispering to herself, what if she knew who it was? The room creaked softly as the wind pressed against the windows. Then, she heard it again, footsteps. She quickly folded the letter and slipped it into her jacket. The door opened, and in walked an elderly man she hadn't seen before. "Your Royal Highness," he said with a bow. His voice was gravelly but kind. "Forgive me for intruding. I'm the caretaker of the archives. Mr. Weller." Charlotte nodded cautiously. "Hello. I was told you've taken an interest in your grandmother," he said. Charlotte's eyes narrowed slightly. "Who told you that?" He smiled faintly. "Let's just say, word travels in this castle faster than sound." He walked toward a nearby shelf, brushing the dust off an old book. "She used to come here too, you know. Sat right there, in that very chair, when she visited Balmoral for the last time." Charlotte's heart jumped. "She came here?" "Yes, only once. Said she wanted to understand the ghosts of this place, as she put it." Charlotte tilted her head. "Ghosts?" He nodded. "Memories that refuse to leave. Choices that still echo." His eyes met hers, and for a moment, Charlotte felt as if he knew exactly what she'd found. "Mr. Weller," she asked softly, "did you know my grandmother?" He smiled sadly. "A little. Enough to know she was braver than anyone gave her credit for." Charlotte hesitated, then asked, "Do you know anything about a red box?" The old man paused. The question seemed to drain the color from his face. He looked toward the window, his expression distant. "The red box," he said slowly, "was never supposed to exist." Charlotte leaned forward. "So it was real?" He nodded faintly. "Every royal keeps one. But hers wasn't official. She had it made privately. Said it contained letters she couldn't trust anyone else with. When she passed, it vanished." "Vanished?" "Some say it was taken by her staff. Others believe it was confiscated." "By who?" He hesitated. "The same people she feared." Charlotte's voice trembled. "The ones who watched her." He looked at her carefully. She used to say, "They're not watching me to protect me. They're watching to control the story." Charlotte swallowed. "Do you know where it is now?" Mr. Weller shook his head. "If I did, I wouldn't be here. But be careful, princess. Some truths aren't meant to be uncovered too soon." Before she could ask more, he bowed slightly and left the room. Charlotte sat there, staring after him, her heart pounding. The ghosts of choices past. That's what he'd called them. She whispered it to herself, the words tasting strange and heavy. The ghosts of choices past. That night, she dreamt of Diana. The dream felt too vivid, too real to be imagination. Diana stood at the edge of a garden, her hair moving gently in the breeze, her eyes soft but sad. She reached out a hand and said, "Tell him I forgive him." Charlotte tried to move closer, but every step she took, the garden faded into mist. She woke with a start, her heart racing. Tell who? Forgive who? When she stepped out of bed, the early morning light cut through the window. She walked to her desk, where she had left the key. It was gone. Panic hit her. She searched under the books, the drawers, the rug, but it had vanished. She ran down the hall toward the library, hoping she might find Mr. Weller again. But when she asked the staff about him, they looked confused. "There's no Mr. Weller employed here, Your Highness," one of them said. Charlotte's blood ran cold. "But I spoke to him yesterday," she insisted. "In the library." The maid exchanged a nervous glance with another staffer. "That's impossible, Princess. Mr. Weller passed away 10 years ago." Charlotte froze. Her breath hitched. She stumbled back, trying to make sense of what she'd just heard. The man she'd spoken to, the man who'd known Diana, had been dead for a decade? She whispered to herself. Ghosts of choices past. The realization hit her like a wave. Had she actually seen a ghost? Or was someone pretending to be him, to warn her, or to frighten her? That evening, she confronted her mother again. "Mummy," Charlotte said quietly, "did Daddy ever make Grandma choose between something she wanted and something the palace wanted?" Kate's face went pale. "Why are you asking me that?" "Because I think Grandma forgave him for something. Something he did before she died." Kate looked away, her voice barely a whisper. "Charlotte, some things are better left where they belong, in the past." "But the past doesn't stay buried," Charlotte replied, her voice trembling with emotion. "It's still here. I saw him, Mummy." Kate's eyes widened. "Who?" "The man Grandma called a ghost." Kate grabbed her daughter's hands, her voice sharp with fear. "Listen to me, Charlotte. If you love this family, if you love your father, stop digging. Some truths destroy more than they heal." Charlotte pulled her hands away. "Maybe they need to be destroyed." Kate's lips parted as if to reply, but she didn't. Instead, she turned and left the room without another word. That night, Charlotte went back to the old wing. The maintenance notice was still there, but the door was ajar now, as if someone had unlocked it again. She slipped inside, holding a flashlight. The air was colder than before. She could hear faint whispers in the dark, her imagination, perhaps, or the sound of wind sneaking through cracks in the stone. On the floor, where the chest once sat, she noticed a new item, a small velvet pouch. Inside it was the brass key she'd lost, and a note. The handwriting was unfamiliar, elegant, but severe. It read, "Stop looking, or you'll end up like her." Charlotte's pulse thundered in her ears. Someone was warning her, or threatening her. She stared at the note for a long time, her breath shaky. Then she whispered, "You can't scare me." But deep down, she knew this wasn't a game anymore. The secrets she'd stumbled upon weren't old legends. They were living shadows, still moving, still watching, still protecting something. And the ghost of Diana wasn't the only spirit haunting the halls of Balmoral. The truth about William's choice, the one Diana had feared, was buried deeper than Charlotte could imagine. But soon, someone else would bring it up. Because the next morning, when Charlotte woke up, her father was waiting outside her room. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot. He held something in his hand, something she instantly recognized. The first letter. "Where did you get this?" he asked quietly. Charlotte froze. "I found it." "In the old wing?" "Yes." He stared at her for a long time, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, finally, he said, "You shouldn't have gone there." "Why not?" "Because that's where I told them to hide it." Her heart stopped. "Told who?" she whispered. He didn't answer. His jaw tightened. "You don't understand what you've done." "Then help me understand." William took a deep breath. "That letter isn't the only one. There's another. One that could destroy this family." Charlotte met his gaze, her voice steady. "Then maybe it deserves to be destroyed." For the first time, the future king of England had no reply. And that silence was louder than any confession. What William said next would tear apart everything Charlotte thought she knew about her grandmother's final days, and reveal the role he played in what came after. But what he confessed next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The castle felt heavier that morning. A strange quietness had settled in, the kind that made even the clocks tick softer. Charlotte hadn't slept. Her father's words kept circling in her head like crows in a storm. "That's where I told them to hide it." Told who? Hide what? The letter sat on her bedside table, still folded neatly, like a forbidden relic from a world she wasn't supposed to touch. Every time she looked at it, she could almost feel Diana's presence. Warm but heavy, loving but burdened. Downstairs, voices murmured. Kate's. Williams. The kind of hushed argument parents have when they think their children can't hear. Charlotte pressed her ear to the door. I told you she's not a child anymore. Kate whispered harshly. She's perceptive, too much like her grandmother. Williams' reply came lower, edged with exhaustion. And that's exactly the problem. We can't let her go digging into this. It's not just about Diana anymore. There are files, documents, that could reopen everything. Kate sighed, voice trembling. You mean her death? Silence. Then Williams said, it wasn't supposed to go this far. Charlotte's heart pounded. She didn't wait to hear more. She stepped away from the door, her breath shallow. Every time she thought she had found the bottom of this secret, the ground kept dropping lower. Later that morning, she found Kate in the sunroom, sitting by the window with a cup of tea gone cold. Her posture was perfect, but her eyes looked distant, like she'd been staring through the glass for hours. Charlotte hesitated in the doorway. Mummy. Kate looked up, forcing a small smile. Yes, darling. Can we talk? Kate gestured to the seat beside her. Of course. Charlotte sat down, the letter hidden behind her back. What's wrong? Kate asked, her tone gentle but cautious. Charlotte's voice was small. Why did Daddy tell them to hide Grandma's letter? Kate froze. The question landed like a shard of glass. She set her cup down slowly, her hands trembling just enough for Charlotte to notice. Where did you hear that? Charlotte's eyes didn't move from her mother's face. He told me himself. Kate closed her eyes for a brief second, then inhaled. Your father loves you very much, Charlotte. And he loved his mother too. But some parts of the past are complicated. That's what everyone says, Charlotte replied quietly. But no one tells me why. Kate's voice softened. Because the truth hurts, my love. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Charlotte frowned. Then you do know. Kate's lips parted as if to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, her gaze drifted toward the framed photo of Diana on the mantel. I was younger than you when I first saw her face, Kate said. Not in person, on the television. She was radiant, untouchable. But behind those eyes, she paused. There was loneliness. A loneliness I didn't understand until I joined this family. Charlotte listened silently. Kate's voice grew quieter. When I married your father, I thought love was enough. I thought we could honor her memory and move forward. But the shadow she left, it doesn't fade. It follows us. Even now. Charlotte tilted her head. Then why hide her letter? If she loved him, if she just wanted to help. Kate exhaled slowly. Because love isn't the same as loyalty, darling. Especially not here. Charlotte blinked, trying to understand. Kate leaned forward, her expression softening. When Diana wrote those letters, she wasn't just warning your father. She was warning the world. She knew things. Dangerous things. And when people know too much. Her voice faltered. Charlotte whispered, they make them disappear. Kate looked startled, then nodded faintly. Sometimes, yes. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the rain had started again, tapping gently against the window. Charlotte finally asked, did you know about the red box? Kate's expression changed, shock first, then something like resignation. Where did you hear about that? Grandma mentioned it in her letter. Kate's shoulders sagged. Then you've seen more than I ever wanted you to. So it's real? Charlotte pressed. Kate hesitated, then nodded slowly. It was. But it was supposed to be destroyed. Why? Kate turned away, her voice barely audible. Because it contained proof of who orchestrated the last days of her life. Charlotte's stomach turned. Proof. Letters. Names. Conversations that were never meant to exist. People high enough in power that even your grandfather was warned not to interfere. Charlotte's voice shook. Did Daddy know? Kate's eyes flickered with pain. He didn't want to, but they made him choose. Between protecting her memory or protecting the crown. Charlotte felt the blood drain from her face. It was the same line from the letter. If they make you choose, remember what's true. Her grandmother had known. She'd predicted this moment. Charlotte whispered, he chose the crown. Kate looked at her, eyes glistening. He was only a boy, Charlotte. And he was terrified. They convinced him that if the truth came out, everything would collapse. The monarchy, the family, everything he was meant to inherit. Charlotte swallowed hard. So he let them lie about how she died. Kate didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her silence was confirmation enough. Charlotte stood, her voice trembling but fierce. That's why he didn't want me to find it. Kate's eyes followed her, sadness etched across her face. He thought he was protecting you. From the truth? Charlotte snapped. Or from himself? Kate's breath caught, the tears threatening to fall. You sound just like her, she whispered. God help us all. Charlotte turned away, her hands shaking. If Grandma was silenced because she told the truth, then maybe it's my turn to finish what she started. Kate stood quickly, fear flashing across her face. No, Charlotte. Don't you ever say that again. Why not? Because there are people still watching, Kate said, her voice cracking. People who have never stopped. You think those cameras outside are for your safety? They're for control. Everything we do, everything we say, it's all managed. Charlotte's heart pounded. Even her death? Kate hesitated, then whispered, especially her death. The words hung in the air like smoke. Kate sank back into her chair, her voice trembling. You're too young to understand what happens when the truth threatens power. They don't protect the truth, they bury it. Charlotte's eyes burned. Then maybe I'll dig it up. Don't, Kate pleaded. Please, promise me you'll stop. But Charlotte couldn't promise that. She had her grandmother's courage, the kind that refused to be silenced. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Charlotte crept back into the study. She couldn't stop thinking about what her mother had said. Proof. Names. Conversations. The red box. If it really existed, someone must know where it went. Someone outside the family. Someone who had been there back then. She searched her father's desk drawers again. Old documents. Sealed folders. Nothing unusual. Then, tucked beneath a pile of letters, she found an envelope marked Confidential, 1997. Her pulse spiked. Inside was a single page. A short memo typed in cold, clinical language. Subject, Confidential handling of Princess of Wales' personal effects. The unauthorized red box has been retrieved and sealed under directive. Contents restricted. Access granted only to senior palace officials. No names. No signatures. But stamped at the bottom in bold red ink. Archive, Kensington Wing. Charlotte exhaled sharply. It still existed. Her grandmother's secrets hadn't been destroyed. They'd been hidden in the one place no one would suspect. She folded the memo and hid it inside her sleeve. Tomorrow, she would go to Kensington Palace. She didn't know how she'd get there yet, or what she would find, but she knew one thing for certain. Her mother was lying about not knowing everything. Because when Charlotte quietly slipped the study door closed, she saw something that made her blood run cold. In the flickering light of the hallway, she caught sight of her mother's reflection in the mirror. Kate was standing in the dark, watching her. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She just looked resigned. And in her hand, she held an old silver lighter, engraved with Diana's initials. The same lighter that had supposedly been lost in the car crash. Charlotte froze, her breath caught in her throat. Mummy. Kate didn't answer. She only whispered, some things were never supposed to survive. Then she flicked the lighter open, the flame briefly illuminating her face before she blew it out and disappeared down the corridor. Charlotte stood frozen, her heart pounding, realizing that her mother's secret ran deeper than she'd imagined. Kate hadn't just known about the letter. She'd been part of keeping it buried. And if she had Diana's lighter, then what else had she kept hidden all these years? Whatever it was, Charlotte knew she couldn't trust anyone in that palace anymore. Because the next person who'd reveal the truth wasn't going to do it out of love. It was going to be out of guilt. And that person was already watching her from the shadows. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. By morning, Balmoral no longer felt like home. It felt like a stage. Every person playing a role, every smile painted on, every silence charged with what wasn't being said. Charlotte had barely slept. The image of her mother standing in the shadows with Diana's lighter replayed in her mind over and over. That small flicker of flame told her something unmistakable. Her mother wasn't just protecting William. She was protecting a secret that stretched back decades, one that could burn the entire institution down. Breakfast came and went without a word. William sat stiffly, eyes fixed on his plate. Kate avoided looking at either of her children. George noticed, but said nothing. Charlotte didn't even try to eat. When the meal ended, William stood. "We're returning to London," he said flatly. "This visit is over." The tone wasn't up for debate. Charlotte's stomach twisted. That could only mean one thing. They were going somewhere more controlled. Somewhere he could lock away the chaos. Within hours, the family jet was airborne. London loomed below them, gray and vast, its skyline blurred by rain. Charlotte stared out the window, wondering if somewhere beneath those clouds lay the answers she was desperate to find. Kensington Palace, the place her grandmother once called home, and the same place the confidential memo had mentioned. When they arrived, the staff greeted them with the usual polished formality, but Charlotte noticed something different this time. Eyes lingered longer. Conversations paused as she passed. It was as if everyone already knew she'd touched something forbidden. Later that evening, when her parents attended a private dinner, Charlotte seized her chance. She waited until the corridors quieted, then slipped out of her room, the folded memo tucked into her pocket. Her small feet made no sound on the polished floors as she navigated the hallways of the palace, places she'd walked all her life. But tonight they felt foreign. Watchful. The Kensington wing. That's where the memo said the sealed box was kept. But she didn't know which room. As she turned a corner, a voice startled her. "Looking for something, Your Highness?" She froze. An older man stood at the end of the hall, dressed in a neatly pressed suit. His face was lined, his hair silver, but his eyes, calm and sharp, seemed to hold too much knowledge. "Who are you?" Charlotte asked carefully. "Name's Mr. Alden, ma'am," he said, bowing slightly. "I served your grandmother." Charlotte's pulse quickened. "You knew her?" He smiled faintly. "I was her personal aide for 12 years. Carried her letters, her diaries, even her secret correspondence when others weren't allowed to." Charlotte hesitated, then stepped closer. "Did she trust you?" He chuckled softly. "Enough to give me nightmares for the rest of my life." Charlotte looked around. "You said you served her. Do you know where her red box is?" His expression changed instantly. The warmth drained from his face. "You shouldn't ask questions like that, Princess." "Please," she said, her voice trembling. "I need to know." He sighed, glancing over his shoulder as if the walls themselves might be listening. "That box is dangerous. Too dangerous for anyone to open, especially you." "Why?" "Because it doesn't just contain her truth," he said quietly. "It contains everyone else's lies." Charlotte blinked. "Then it should be seen." He shook his head slowly. "Your grandmother thought that too. That's why she's gone." Charlotte felt her throat tighten. "You mean someone killed her for it?" Mr. Alden didn't answer. He simply said, "They warned her to stay silent." She didn't. The car wasn't the punishment, it was the message. Charlotte stepped back, the words sinking like ice into her chest. "You're saying the crash wasn't an accident?" "I'm saying," he whispered, "that the truth and the official story are rarely the same thing." For a moment, neither spoke. The rain tapped softly against the windows, the palace breathing in heavy silence. Finally, Charlotte asked, "Then why are you telling me this?" He met her eyes. "Because you remind me of her." The same eyes. The same fire. He turned slightly, nodding toward a narrow corridor. "If you're set on finding it, there's something you need to see first." Charlotte followed without hesitation. They walked through the dim hallways, down a small staircase that led to a locked door. "Mr. Alden produced a worn key from his pocket and unlocked it. Inside was a small archival room, dusty shelves, faded labels, and the faint smell of parchment. He pulled out a box wrapped in linen. "This isn't the red box," he said, "but it's connected to it." Charlotte helped him unwrap it. Inside were old photographs, letters, and a small black notebook. "This belonged to your grandmother's aide," he explained. "She kept records of everything Diana said in her final weeks. She was terrified, Princess. Terrified and alone." Charlotte opened the notebook, her fingers trembling. The entries were dated July and August 1997, weeks before the crash. July 14th, she says they're watching her again. She's afraid her phone is tapped. She believes someone inside the palace has betrayed her. July 26th, said she met with a friend about the red box. Said it must never fall into their hands. August 12th, she cried today. Said she'd seen something she wasn't supposed to. She mentioned a name, then stopped herself. Said if anything happened, William must be told to forgive her. Charlotte's chest tightened. That was the same line from the letter. "Tell him I forgive him." She flipped through more pages. One note stood out, written in bold letters. August 30th, she said she'd finally hidden the box. Said no one would find it without her key. I asked where it was. She smiled and said, "Close enough to watch over them. Far enough to be safe." Charlotte looked up. "What does that mean?" Mr. Alden's face was grim. "We never knew. The next day, she was gone. She stared down at the notebook, her pulse roaring in her ears. You said this aide. What happened to her? He hesitated. She disappeared 2 weeks later. No trace. Charlotte shivered. You think they? Yes, he interrupted softly. The same they your grandmother warned about. Charlotte clenched her fists. So everyone who tried to tell the truth was silenced. He nodded. And yet the truth still found its way to you. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she whispered, You kept this all these years. He smiled faintly. I made a promise to Diana. She told me, when her light returns, give her this. I never knew who she meant. Until now. Charlotte's breath caught. You think I'm her light? He nodded slowly. You're the only one brave enough to ask the questions everyone else buries. He placed a small envelope in her hand. This was in the box when I found it. She wrote it the night before she died. I don't know what's inside. I was too afraid to open it. Charlotte held the envelope gently, her fingers trembling. Thank you, she whispered. Mr. Alden looked at her one last time. Be careful, princess. They'll sense you know now. And once they do, you won't be able to unsee what's coming. Then he turned and left the room, disappearing into the dark corridor. Charlotte opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper with her grandmother's handwriting, delicate but urgent. My dear one, if you find this, it means I was right. The truth is alive. But be warned, he was there that night. Not by choice, but by silence. Forgive him, but do not let him silence you too. Charlotte froze. He was there that night. Her father. The weight of those words hit her like a punch. She read them again, slower this time, her eyes burning. Not by choice, but by silence. That meant he had known something. Maybe not everything, but enough to carry the guilt all these years. Tears welled in her eyes. Why didn't you stop it? She whispered to the empty room. Why didn't anyone? The sound of footsteps snapped her back to reality. She quickly folded the letter and hid it inside her jacket. The steps were approaching, heavy, deliberate. Through the crack in the door, she saw a figure moving down the hall. Not Mr. Alden this time. Someone taller, broader. Her father. He stopped in front of the archival door. Charlotte, he said softly, but the tone was different now. Not angry, not even fatherly, just tired. She didn't answer. He sighed. I know what you found. Her pulse spiked. Then why didn't you tell me? She called out, her voice trembling. Because, he said, his hand resting on the doorframe. Some ghosts don't forgive twice. She stepped back, clutching the envelope tighter. Grandma did. William's eyes glistened under the dim light. You don't know what forgiveness cost her. He turned slightly, glancing down the corridor before whispering. They're already watching you. You need to stop. Charlotte shook her head. I can't. His voice dropped. Then I can't protect you. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Father and daughter, heir and truth seeker, bound by a secret that could destroy them both. And then, without another word, William walked away, leaving her standing there in the half-dark, clutching the letter that could rewrite royal history. Charlotte sank to her knees, tears streaking her face. She whispered to the paper, I won't stop, Grandma. I promise. But she didn't realize someone else had heard every word. A camera light blinked faintly from the corner of the ceiling. A hidden surveillance feed. Her every move had just been recorded. And by morning, that recording wouldn't be a secret anymore. Because the next person to see it wasn't a royal at all, but someone in the press. And that would be the spark that set the monarchy on fire. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming.